Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing some of my favorite Why Choose fantasy romance books. Alright guys, so for those of you who don't know, Why Choose used to be known as reverse harem, and it means one woman with multiple love interests. Now, I am super picky when it comes to Why Choose, so I do have a couple Why Choose on here that I personally wasn't a huge fan of, but they do have pretty high ratings on Goodreads, so I wanted to include them just in case you ended up enjoying those books. Now, there are a decent amount of books on this list, so I want to keep this intro pretty short. If you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all out of the way, let's talk about these Why Choose fantasy romances. So starting off, we have Bonded by Thorns, and this is a Why Choose fantasy romance, but it is also a Beauty and the Beast reimagining. So we are following Rosalina, and Rosalina lives in this small town where everyone believes that Rosalina's father is insane, and that is because he believes that his wife, Rosalina's mother, was actually kidnapped by the Fae. Now, on top of this, Rosalina is in an on-again, off-again relationship with our Gaston-type character, and he treats her pretty terribly, which is why Rosalina is shocked when he comes back home to her small town and proposes. Now, on the same night that the Gaston character proposes to Rosalina, she also finds out that her father has gone missing. So she decides she is going to try to find her father, and while looking for him, she ends up in the Fae world. Now, she stumbles upon this castle, and in this castle are 4 beastly Fae princes, and they have her father in a cell. So Rosalina makes a deal with them that she will help them try to find their mates, because that is the reason they are cursed, and in doing so, they will let her father go. So that is where our story pretty much starts off. Now, I should also mention all 4 princes are forced to turn into beasts, but their beasts actually reflect whatever season they're in charge of. So it was pretty unique. It had a lot of fun tropes. I will say it was not quite as spicy as I was expecting, and our main character really doesn't do much in terms of spice. There is a spicy scene, but it's between 2 of the princes, and our main character is not involved at all. But I do believe as you progress through the series, it does get more and more spicy, and I'm excited to see where this story goes. And next up, we have Order of Scorpions by Ivy Asher. Why is no one else talking about this book? Because I picked this up on a whim. Actually, I think one of you guys recommended it to me, and I adore it, and I never see people talking about it, and it's so good, and it's so dark, and it's a standalone. So yes, it's long, but it's also so good. So we are following our main character, and her name is Offset, and she ends up waking up completely naked in this cage, realizing that she has no memory of who she is or why she's there. She's then taken to this interrogator who tries to get this information out of her, and like I said, she has no memory. So while this interrogator is torturing her, this group of people barge in. They're mercenaries. They kill her interrogator, but they leave Offset chained to the floor. So she looks up, sees them, and says, I am going to get revenge on these mercenaries who just left me here to rot. So Offset ends up being sold to this assassin training camp where she is forced to learn to become an assassin in the hopes that she will be purchased by a mercenary group and then be able to eventually pay for her freedom by killing people. So it comes the time where she's about to be purchased by a mercenary group, and who shows up but those mercenaries that left her for dead. And the story goes from there. So most of the story is Offset trying to discover where she came from, why she was kidnapped in the first place, but then there's also a romance between Offset and all of the mercenaries. And I just love this. I thought it was so fun. I read this in a day, and she is thick, but I was just so gripped by the story. And I just highly, highly recommend. If you're okay with darker fantasy romance and you want Why Choose, I think you will love this. And next up is Thief of Silver and Souls, and this book was actually the inspiration for this video. This was my January Patreon book club pick, and I am so happy we picked this book because I ended up enjoying this so much more than I was expecting. So in this story, we are following Ivy, and in Ivy's world, there are people that are born with magic, but this magic abides by the law of equivalent exchange. So you have to give something in order to use your magical ability. Now, in this world, this magic is seen as inherently evil, while there are people that actually will cut off limbs and body parts and offer them to the gods, and if the gods bless them, that magic is seen as okay and like blessed. So our main character, unfortunately, was born with this inherent magic, and she accidentally kills her young sister when she is pretty much a child herself. So she spends the rest of her time growing up trying to make amends by essentially being like a Robin Hood type character, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. That is until she ends up stumbling upon this noblewoman who is dying and accidentally steals her soul and puts her soul into her body. Now, this noblewoman seems okay with kind of being stuck as a ghost inside of our main character because she needs to get revenge and try to uncover this conspiracy that is going on in this noble college. So our main character agrees to help this ghost, and together they end up partnering with these group of very attractive guys that all have special powers, and they're going to try to solve the mystery of what is happening at this noble college. And the story goes from there, and oh my gosh, I was not expecting quite so much mystery. I will say this book is not spicy at all. I was expecting super spice. This is much more of a fantasy romance, and I also love the fact that this author spends time exploring the relationship between our main character and every single one of the love interests. Like, normally with Why Choose Romances, I'll get annoyed because I can't keep the guys straight. I'm going to talk about that in a few books I'm going to talk about later in this video. But for this, they were so fleshed out that, like, I knew every single guy. Like, I had no issues whatsoever. So if you are a huge fan of fantasy romance and you want to dip your toe into Why Choose, I feel like this is a great starting point. And my absolute favorite Why Choose of all time has to be the Bonds That Tie series by Bree. Say what you will about this series, I adore it. I love it so much. I inhaled these books. I could not stop reading. I remember I was reading and then the audiobooks stopped because there was a decent amount of time between the 4th and 5th book, and it was agonizing. I needed to know what was going to happen. But if you're unfamiliar with the Bonds That Tie series, we are following Oleander, and Oleander lives in this world where people have bonds. So it's normally one woman with multiple male bonds, and if you are with your bonded, you're almost like powered up. So Oleander's mother has 2 bonded, and at the start of our story, Oleander is driving, or they're fleeing with her mother and her mother's bonded, and there is a car accident. And Oleander is the only survivor. Now, Oleander, instead of going back to the people that she knows will be her bonds when she gets older, she instead flees and essentially tries to disappear. Now, Oleander's bonds are very upset by this because obviously the bond group should be together, so they spend time trying to track her down, and this book starts essentially when they find her and drag her back home. So I will say this first book is a little bit more of like a bully romance. There are a couple of upsetting scenes, so definitely check trigger warnings. But as the story progresses, it just becomes so filled with action, and also the romance is so good. Knox and North are by far my favorite bonds, but honestly, I loved them all, and similar to the last book I talked about, they were all so unique and fleshed out, and I just really appreciated that. So, like I said, my favorite Why Choose fantasy romance of all time. Please give it a try if you haven't yet. And next up, we have The Never King by Nikki St. Crowe. So this is the first in a Why Choose fantasy romance series that's inspired by Peter Pan. Now, I did not finish the series. I only read the first 2 books, but they were super spicy and super fun. So we're following the descendants of Wendy Darling, and our main character, Wendy, has been told by her mother that she needs to keep the windows shut, and on her 18th birthday that Peter Pan is going to kidnap her. Now, our main character, Wendy, is like, yeah, my mom is insane. That is until on her 18th birthday, Peter Pan does show up and he takes her to Neverland, where she meets the Lost Boys. And it's essentially a romance between Peter Pan, the Lost Boys, and Wendy. And that is all the series really is. There is a plot. There's a whole thing with Hook going on. However, this is really just spicy fun time. And I enjoyed the first 2 books. I'm not really sure why I never finished. I might go back and finish the series. But overall, super fun. And if you like Why Choose and Peter Pan, definitely check it out. And the next 2 series are both by Tessa Hale. So first up we have Legacy of Shadows, which is more of a paranormal Why Choose romance. I binged this last year and I loved it. We're following this girl who has a very upsetting home life. Her mother and stepfather are very abusive, and her best friend ended up moving away a few years ago. So her estranged best friend comes back and says, hey, I want to get you out of this situation. Come live with me and my friends. So she agrees, and when she gets there, she meets his roommates. And then there is a little bit of a paranormal aspect going on in terms of the university they go to and the powers that they harbor. And it definitely had those like suspense elements. Every book ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. It's a 3-book series. but I loved this so much. If you're looking for a paranormal wide choose, look no further. And I am currently in the middle of reading Twilight of Embers, which is a fantasy why choose romance by Tessa, Hale, and this one includes dragon shifters. So kind of similar to the last book, we're following this girl who ends up attending this new university, and when she gets there, she meets these 5 really attractive guys. There's a jock, then there's the tortured hero, like, you know, all of the tropes, and then she finds out, I believe, that they're actually dragon shifters, and they have an enemy that wants to harm anyone that they hold dear, and that happens to be our main character. So this sounds so good. I started the audiobook and it features Joe Arden, which just makes me so happy. And I will have a full review of this on my Instagram once I finish, but I already know this is going to be one of my favorite series of the year. And the last 2 books on this list are actually paranormal why choose romances. However, I still want to include them because they do have some of those like fantasy elements that I feel like a lot of people that enjoy fantasy romance why choose will also enjoy paranormal why choose. I hope that made sense. Anyway, first up, we have Baby and the Late Night Howlers, and this is by Kathryn Moon. So this is an Omegaverse why choose paranormal romance. We're following this girl that finds out that she is actually a different type of shifter than she thought she was. I'm sorry, guys, I'm terrible with Omegaverse. And anyway, she finds out that she actually has to select a group of shifters to live with and be their mate. So she ends up picking this group of motorcycle club shifters, and it's actually adorable because although these guys are really tough, they never expected to get a mate, so they really don't know what they're doing, so it's a little bit of a learning process for both our main character and the motorcycle club people. But it's essentially them navigating her being their mate and all of that entails. And there's also a other motorcycle gang that is like trying to get these guys. And overall, it was fun. But this is definitely a why choose romance where I could not keep the guys straight. I had no idea what guy was which. There just wasn't enough time spent with each guy personally for me. So that was my biggest issue with this book. But overall, it was still really fun, and I definitely will be reading the second book in this series. It features a character that we meet in this book, and I loved her, so I'm sure I'm gonna love the second book. And the last book, personally, I only rated 2 stars. However, a lot of my friends rated it 5 stars and said it's their favorite why choose romance of all time. And that is The Lady of Rooksgrave Manor. So personally, I actually have a reading vlog where I tried monster romance for the first time, and you can get like my reactions as I'm reading, so I'll leave that in the cards in the description. But this book was a time, and personally, just not a time for me. But we are following this woman that works as a maid, and she ends up seeing, I believe, Dr. Jekyll doing something to a patient, and she becomes very interested. So the doctor asks her if she would be willing to work at his establishment of ill repute, I think is like what the term they use. And she becomes a mistress to a bunch of monsters. So most of the book is just this girl sleeping with all of these different monsters and like how it goes down. So you have a golem, you have an invisible man, pretty sure you have a vampire, like every monster you could imagine. And she just has spicy time with them. And at the end, there is like a bit of a plot, but for the most part, it is just her having a fun time with monsters. And hey, if that is what you enjoy, definitely check this book out. I just wanted a little bit more, but like I said, a lot of people love this book and it has pretty good reviews on Goodreads, so definitely give it a try. All right, guys, those are my why choose fantasy romance recommendations. Please let me know down in the comments below if there is another why choose fantasy romance that I didn't mention. I love getting recommendations from you guys. And I'd like to say a huge thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda and Erin. Thank you guys so much for your support. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!